The Prime Minister unveils his plan for living with COVID in a difficult winter. Booster jabs will be offered to over 50s from next week, with compulsory face masks and vaccine passports kept in reserve.
We are confident in the vaccines that have made such a difference to our lives. And we're now intensifying that effort.
Also tonight, the Love Island star experiencing the hate-filled side of social media.
The networks are not supportive enough when it comes to trolling. I've reported some messages before and they come back saying, we've looked at it and it doesn't break community guidelines.
Swapping school uniform for Chanel, Emma Raducanu outshines the biggest stars at fashion's glitziest event. And
Daddy, my daddy!
a childhood classic, The Railway Children gets a ticket to the modern age.
This is the ITV Evening News with Romilly Weeks.
Good evening. The Prime Minister today unveiled the government's winter plan for managing coronavirus and issued a warning that we still face a challenge. Plan A relies on the vaccine working, and to help that, over 50s and vulnerable groups will be offered a booster across the UK from next week. It's hoped that will keep the number of hospitalisations low and prevent the NHS being overwhelmed by the Delta variant in the coming months. If it doesn't work, then Plan B for England could see COVID passports introduced, mandatory masks and more working from home. And lockdowns aren't being ruled out either. Here's our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan, on coping with COVID.
Booster jabs for the old, one-off jabs for the young, jabs for those who should already be jabbed. Vaccination is at the centre of the winter coronavirus plan, and despite the death of his mother yesterday, the Prime Minister presented it in person with a warning.
COVID is still out there. The disease, sadly, still remains a risk. But I'm confident that we can keep going with our plan to turn jabs into jobs, and protect the gains that we've made together.
The concern is not everyone has come forward for vaccination, and cases, hospitalisations and deaths are all higher than the same time last year, just as the weather is turning.
Winter is coming and people really should take this seriously. If you've not had your vaccination, now is a very good time to do so.
But what if the Prime Minister's plan isn't enough?
So if this goes in the wrong direction and cases go up, followed by hospitalisations, it's important that the measures are put in place early enough and they're significant enough.
So in case COVID causes unsustainable pressure on England's NHS, there is a plan B, under which face coverings could once more become mandatory in some settings, along with new work-from-home guidance, and vaccine passports could be introduced. Yes, the same vaccine passports the Health Secretary ruled out at the weekend.
He's now saying they will keep it in reserve, and yesterday Downing Street said vaccine passports are a first line of defence against a winter wave. What exactly is the position? Rather than zigzagging all over the place on vaccine passports, can we just get clarity?
And not everyone's convinced that winter, when respiratory illnesses peak, is the best time to drop rules on things like mask wearing. At this garden trade show in Birmingham, there were mixed views.
I think that's a shame. I mean, I think the issue is, why not wear face masks for us and everybody else?
I personally was an advocate of that, and I think every little bit that we can do to help would help us all.
I think it's much better that we're given the choice, and I certainly believe for the economy's sake and for our youngsters' sake, we do not want another lockdown.
Many in the Conservative Party feel the same way, which is why the Prime Minister is opting for a light-touch Plan A, whilst keeping Plan B in his toolkit, just in case the virus is more of a perennial problem. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Westminster.
Much then rests on the protection offered by the vaccine and the new booster programme, which starts across the UK from next week. It will be given to tens of millions of people and could give all of us as normal a winter as possible. Our health editor, Emily Morgan, has been speaking to some of those set to benefit.
This care home in Peterborough knows all too well the fatal effects of COVID. 7 of its residents have died from it. Protecting the rest then from another surge is vital. George is only here temporarily. He hopes another vaccination will finally end his ordeal.
You can't beat being at home, but it's one of those things, is safety. I think once we get this year over with, we'll be really on top of it, have a little bit more knowledge about affecting us really, or what could affect us.
George will now be one of 32 million people offered a third jab as the government tries to keep on top of COVID this winter. Those eligible for a booster 6 months after their second dose will be adults over 50, as well as care home residents and healthcare workers. Those under 50 with underlying health conditions and anyone who lives with someone who's immunosuppressed. They'll get either the Pfizer vaccine or a half dose of Moderna, regardless of which vaccine they've had already. Despite data showing immunity from the vaccine only wanes very marginally after 6 months, scientists are adamant boosters are necessary.
What is it that actually really persuaded you we need a booster jab if immunity remains really high?
I don't know if many of you are used to kind of crawling into small tents on mountainsides, but if you do so and you know there's a storm blowing, it's better to put some extra guy ropes on there and then than it is to wait until it's the middle of the night, it's howling with wind and rain. So it's better to be preemptive.
Pfizer's arrived.
Surgeries across the country have been planning for the booster programme for months and are ready to start next week.
We've already stepped up a workforce to deliver the flu campaign to the usual population, so the over 65s and people who would be clinically vulnerable. And the plan is that we will be delivering that same cohort, their COVID booster, at the same time.
Scientists say both COVID boosters and flu jabs should give us as normal a winter as possible. The rest of us are hoping that is true. Emily Morgan, ITV News.
Well, one of the places especially keen to avoid further measures in the weeks ahead is Bulletin. The town has already been placed under more local lockdowns than most. Currently, it has the lowest infection rate in the Greater Manchester area. Our North of England reporter Hannah Miller heard the views of people and businesses in the town.
In Bolton, the legacy of old restrictions is hanging over their heads. Here, where they had some of the toughest rules in the country, stallholders say confidence is only just coming back and bringing business with it.
If we go back into wearing masks and, doing this and so on, it's just going to be another, people will go back into themselves, and it's going to take a long time again to bring them out.
We struggled enough as it is, trying to keep staff's jobs, trying to keep everybody employed and everything else. So it's not going to be good, is it, if there's another lockdown, really?
How confident are you that it'll stay normal through the winter?
I'm 100% confident. I'm not scared anymore.
But for many of those who can't have the vaccine, normal feels a long way away. Nina's only just gone back to work after being told to shield because of multiple sclerosis. She worries about what winter will bring.
In terms of what it's going to look like in winter, I'm dreading it, to be fair.
Really?
Yeah.
What are you dreading?
Everything. Going out, meeting people, socialising, that won't happen. Everything. It's just so nerve-wracking.
But for pubs and bars, it's the decision to keep restrictions in reserve that adds to the anxiety. The new owners of this pub have got their first taste of freedom, and they don't want that to change.
Obviously, we took it on the place itself with all these restrictions already in place, and to finally get a taste of what it's like to be out of them and then to be potentially shoved back in them all again, it's just not a nice feeling.
In this town, the signs have been in place so long that their warnings are starting to fade. But the message might only become more important in the weeks and months to come. Hannah Miller, ITV News, Bolton.
And our political editor, Robert Peston, is in Downing Street tonight. Robert, the Prime Minister was stressing today the risks of where we are right now. If that's the case, why isn't he acting now?
So that's precisely what I asked him and his scientific advisors when I saw them in their Swish media centre that they built behind me. And what they said was that they think we are protecting ourselves, self-policing. Really? They obviously haven't been in a pub, restaurant, shop or on public transport recently, because when I've done all those things, I've barely seen a mask in sight. Now, with schools going back in England, Wales, Northern Ireland, with the weather getting colder, people spending more time indoors, many scientists think we will see a surge in infections. But the key metric or measure, according to the scientific advisors, is what happens to hospitalisations. So Patrick Vallance, the government's chief scientific advisor, said to me, as soon as they see a sharp rise in hospitalisations, they will act. Now, let's be clear, hospitalisations are roughly 4 times what they were a year ago. If there's a surge, what we'll see is mandatory mask wearing, mandatory use of COVID certificates if we go to large indoor gatherings, and even possibly a recommendation to work from home.
Thanks for that, Robert. Staying with COVID, and Scotland's First Minister has confirmed that the current level of restrictions will remain in place for the time being, while announcing they'd also be offering vaccines to 12 to 15-year-olds as well as booster jabs. Nicola Sturgeon said precautions such as mandatory wearing of face masks in some settings would continue to be enforced. Meanwhile, the Health Secretary indicated today the government is planning to scrap the requirement in England for double jab travellers to take a PCR test when they return from abroad. It's understood people returning from a green or amber list country will only need to take a lateral flow test. Today's unemployment figures were another promising sign that the economy is recovering from the pandemic. The numbers back in work are almost back to where they were before coronavirus, and job vacancies are at a record high. But with furlough due to end this month, there could be trouble ahead, and our economics editor, Joel Hill, is here. Joel, good figures, but concerns about the future.
There's a lot to celebrate here. The number of people on company payrolls, 29.1 million. Has returned to the level it was last March when the first lockdown began. And the economy is awash with vacancies. 1.1 million were recorded in August, according to the Office for National Statistics, the highest number for 20 years. Every sector of the economy is recruiting. Accommodation and food services, hotels, bars and restaurants have 135,000 jobs that need filling at the bottom there. But in that sector and many others, the number of people on furlough is actually higher than the number of vacancies on offer, suggesting, Romilly, that those people who do lose their jobs when the scheme ends in 2 weeks' time may have to retrain if they want to find work. Now, the government is still subsidising more than 1 million people, despite the fact the scheme ends in a couple of weeks' time. That's an awful lot. We don't know what's going to happen to them, but as it falls away, airlines, airports, tour operators have half of their staff on the job retention scheme. At the moment, though, there is no evidence, we should say in the data, that companies have begun to lay off their staff. The good news here is there's an abundance of vacancies. The concerning news is companies say they're struggling to recruit. Got to sort that out. We need those vacancies filled if high inflation is going to be avoided.
Interesting, Joel. Thank you. Still to come on the ITV Evening News.
I'm Emma Raducanu and I'm on my way to the Met Gala. I'm so excited. Bye!
How Britain's new tennis star is set to cash in off the court. And the excitement around Tracy Beaker author Jacqueline Wilson's new project.
When I woke up this morning, I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to meet Jacqueline Wilson today. And I was just so excited. And when I saw her, I couldn't stop smiling.
Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. Social media companies are not doing enough to stamp out abuse on their sites, a former Love Island contestant told MPs today. Amy Hart said she stopped reporting the vile comments and even death threats because she doesn't believe anything will be done. Lucy Watson has been hearing some of the hateful abuse she's received.
Look at the state of you. You look plastic, absolute waste of organs, fake teeth, fake boobs, fake personality.
That's the message Amy Hart woke up to this morning on social media from a complete stranger.
So I've had death threats. I mean, there's one girl that messages me every day to send me horrible things, and I block her accounts, then she makes new ones.
The abuse has come since Amy was thrown into the limelight in Love Island 2 years ago. She then became an influencer online.
Like, yeah, you can't really get away from it apart from getting rid of your phone, but you can't get rid of your phone because that's your job now.
Amy, Nicole, good morning and thank you for joining us.
So today she took her experiences to a select committee and criticised the social networks for failing to protect their users.
The networks are not supportive enough when it comes to trolling. I've reported some messages before and they come back saying, we've looked at it and it doesn't break community guidelines.
Blogger Nicole Ochran was also there. She campaigns for greater help from social media sites.
The platforms don't move fast enough. They don't move at all.
What's the response when you've reached out to them?
Oh, we haven't heard anything back.
We did, however. Facebook said, we understand how upsetting it is for Amy to receive hurtful comments, and we don't want this to happen on Instagram or Facebook. We have strict guidelines against bullying and harassment and have introduced a number of safety tools. Amy has more than 1 million followers on Instagram, but doesn't think the company's response is good enough.
They need to do more and they need to put people's well-being above money, really, and start banning people.
An influencer's lifestyle is built online. Their lives are exposed and they want them protected. Lucy Watson, ITV News.
The Chinese ambassador has been banned from the Houses of Parliament. Jing Zegwan has been barred by the speakers of both the Lords and Commons after the Chinese government imposed sanctions on several British MPs. The Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, said it was inappropriate for him to come onto the Commons estate. Members of the British Medical Association have voted in support of the union taking a neutral view on assisted dying. 49% of its representatives voted to support the motion, with 48% voting against. Previously, the BMA had been opposed to a change in the law on assisted dying. Torrential rain hit London and the southeast this morning, bringing the bizarre sight of flash flooding on Tower Bridge. It caused delays on several major roads and underground lines. And Ocado has said the government should make it easier to hire HGV drivers from abroad. The online food retailer said the current driver shortage is expected to cost it £5 million this year. Next tonight, after stunning the world of sport, Emma Raducanu has now dazzled the world of fashion too. The 18-year-old is clearly loving her extended stay in Manhattan and last night made her mark at New York's glitzy Met Gala. And as Rebecca Barry reports, it's just a taste of what could be to come for the teen sensation.
I'm Emma Raducanu and I'm on my way to the Met Gala. I'm so excited. Bye!
A few months ago, she was in her school uniform doing A-levels. Last night, Emma Raducanu wore Chanel, now an A-lister, at the Met Gala, fashion's most prestigious event. It was just 48 hours after she'd won the US Open and the £1.8 million prize. But now marketing experts say the teenager has the potential to earn much more.
Is she the most marketable athlete in the world right now?
No question. I think because she appeals to so many different audiences. I mean, she came off the court, she handled everything, beautifully in terms of the press conferences, the media, the cameras. She then does an interview in Mandarin, which opens up the whole Asian and Chinese market. Yeah, by a long way, she's the most marketable athlete on the planet.
She's already done this Vogue photo shoot, an athlete with the ability to transcend sport. Those in fashion say whatever Emma wears, others will want.
She's fashion's new rising star. I think we can expect her to be incredibly influential over a younger generation of what they're buying. They'd probably want to dress like her. We've already seen that the Nike outfit that she wore throughout the US Open, it's completely sold out. We can maybe expect to see, very lucrative contracts coming her way from some of the world's most luxury fashion houses.
As a child, Emma was shy, but says playing tennis has made her fearless. Surely that is priceless. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
Team GB's relay team are almost certain to lose their Olympic medals after it was confirmed that sprinter CJ Uja tested positive for banned substances. Uja was part of the quartet who won silver in the 100-metre relay last month. He was provisionally suspended at the Games when Ostarine and S23 were found in his sample. If the ban is upheld, Canada would be upgraded to silver and China would receive bronze. And finally tonight, more than a century after it was first published, classic novel The Railway Children is being given a modern makeover. Dame Jacqueline Wilson, best known for her Tracy Beaker series, has the tricky task of updating a book that's been a hit across generations. She told our correspondent Rachel Younger about revisiting a story that hasn't run out of steam.
She's one of Britain's best-loved authors, retelling a classic written in 1906.
Long, long ago, maybe when your grandmother's grandmother was a girl.
The same age as these children when she wrote her first novel, 100 books later, she's turning back to her childhood.
I loved Edith Nesbit's The Railway Children when I was a little girl, and I knew Edith Nesbit sometimes borrowed ideas from other authors, and so I thought the shade of Edith Nesbit would not mind in the slightest if I borrowed her basic idea. Daddy, my daddy!
The story of three children forced to move to rural Yorkshire when their father's wrongly imprisoned has been adapted for the screen several times, but this is a more modern take.
In most children's storybooks from the past, there would always be some magic device to make things better, or adults were always all-powerful. Mother was always splendid and in control and never had a fit of hysterics. I like to write about people rather as I think they are, and so I hope children will identify with the children in the book.
And on board one of the vintage train lines where the story's still set, her first readers were soon transported.
When I woke up this morning, I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to meet Jacqueline Wilson today, and I was just so excited, and when I saw her, I couldn't stop smiling.
Dame Jacqueline's dream is that her young fans might try the old classic too, part of a journey into reading with the power to take them anywhere. Rachel Younger, ITV News, East Sussex.
Sounds like a great read. That is all for now. Raggy will be here with news at 10. From me and all the team, goodbye.